folks. This is the Shankly Sessions, the Liverpool podcast that we bring you each and every week. If you could head out there to YouTube and smash that subscribe and bell notification button. And of course, if you could drop a like on the video and the content to help us challenge that YouTube algorithm. Thought I'd jump on and do kind of a little bonus Shankly Sessions show this evening, just a short show. God, the last 24 hours to 48 hours have been absolutely crazy, haven't they? With bids going in for Jude Bellingham, then coming out of the race for Jude Bellingham and all sorts of stuff. Absolutely crazy stuff going on. So I thought what I'd do is I'd give it 24 hours, let the dust settle. I know a number of my fellow Liverpool content creators jumped on all sorts of hours last night, and fair play, just jumping on at that hour to release it. But I kind of, sometimes when these things hit, I like the dust to kind of settle just a little bit and just try and get a little bit beyond the hysteria first before we go absolutely crazy on this news. But I'd like to definitely talk about Jude Bellingham tonight and give my thoughts on it. And I think most people who watch my podcast at least would know that probably since October, I've kind of been in the corner where I didn't believe Jude Bellingham would come to us. I didn't believe we would sign him. I don't really buy into anything that FSG puts out there, the propaganda basically that they put out there into the fan base to fragment us against each other with our opinions, to deflect from the real issues that are at the club. And I've been speaking about that a number of times this season. And I think around October I thought it, because I thought going into the season, I thought we maybe needed one or two midfielders. And of course, our hopes were really high for this season on the back of missing out on a quad and stuff like that. But the season has kind of been a disaster. Small sprinkling of high points, but really a lot of low points, and a lot of, as we've said before, a lot of records being broken for all the wrong reasons. And it's been a real struggle this season. And as the season went on, I've also spoke about that probably on a monthly basis when you look at Liverpool and you digest the way the season has gone. We've gone from needing one, maybe two midfielders to suddenly needing about 6, maybe 7 players. Again, let me know in the chat what your thoughts are on that. How many players do you think we need, and what are the key positions that we need to strengthen in? But safe to say, I was of the opinion that I didn't believe in the war chest that was spoken about, that Jurgen Klopp was going to have this war chest in the summer loaded to the gazills with money to rebuild Liverpool into the great club that it was over the last few years and stuff like that, how the mighty have fallen, obviously. So I didn't believe in that. And I kind of assessed it as well, and I said, right, as the season went on, the need for more and more players, a lot of players more injury prone, bewildering kind of tactics, players dropping off in terms of their performance, not what they were. I mean, we spoke about Virgil van Dijk coming back off the injury, not quite being the Virgil van Dijk that he once was. Maybe a summer break and a pre-season might revitalise him back into where he was. Obviously losing Luis Diaz, obviously Thiago being injury prone, and picking up injuries that kind of seem like niggles but tend to keep him out for 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, which is a huge chunk for us, especially in creativity in the midfield. Jordan Henderson had a poor season by his own standards as club captain as well. The drop off in Fabinho, obviously Keita, Knox going out the door, talk of Joel Matip going out the door. Not too sure what we want to do with Curtis Jones. Not too sure what the future holds for Joe Gomez. The whole conundrum of Trent, midfield, defense, what they want to do. So many questions. The drop off in Mo Salah, the stats look okay, but to the eye, you can see the issues that are there blatantly in terms of games that he doesn't show up in. Maybe not necessarily his fault. It could be the formation or the tactics or the fact that we had him out wide, all these things that we speak about. But what all that really rolls up into is a need for a massive rebuild as opposed to a sprinkling of players going into key positions to re-energize things and stuff like that. There's a lot of positions needed, not only in the starting 11, but also in terms of our bench. Because the one thing we've noticed this season as well, that when we have had a problem and when we have had injuries and we've gone to the bench, it's a real problem because the drop off is huge. And that's a real problem as well when you're up against the likes of City, or over the next few years. I've already spoken about how the top four battle or the top four race is going to be really, really tough. Newcastle developing transfer window after transfer window under Eddie Howe, they're going to become very powerful. And eventually, with the money and the wealth that's there, they're eventually going to step up the quality up another level from where they are. And they've had a sensational season. We can see how good Eddie Howe is as a coach and how he handles things, not messing about, even the other day with Gordon and stuff like that. Man United, of course, it looks like they're going for a third round of bids. Not too sure what that means. I haven't looked into it, but we will be, and I'll talk to Darren tomorrow night on Thursday. Tier Talk catches at 9 o'clock. We'll have beat the bookie and all the usual good stuff. But it'll be interesting to see how they develop. They're obviously going to strengthen and bring in more players. City, of course, will continue to develop. Talk of a number of players leaving, but they will strengthen. There's no doubt about it. And they're certainly in the conversation when it comes to Jude Bellingham, and certainly not scared to put money out there when it needs to be done and put it down on the table. So it's a real dilemma for us insofar as this rebuild as well. When I thought about it today, and I was thinking, a number of people have said over the next 3 or 4 windows or something like that. And I was thinking, this rebuild can take 2 seasons, because if this rebuild takes 2 seasons on from now, what's the impact on Alisson? What's the impact on Virgil? What's the impact on Mo Salah? And these players, what's the impact on them? Suddenly they're over that 30 mark and stuff like that, and well into nearly their mid-30s at that stage and all. So by the time we arrive at the completion of that rebuild, if that's the case, we suddenly have another rebuild on our hands to replace key players like those guys. And if that was the thinking, what effect does that then have on those players? I mean, I suppose we don't want to talk about these things either as Liverpool fans, but is it a stretch to think that if the club has made promises to Mo Salah in terms of what their plan was, and that plan hasn't been delivered, what's to say he doesn't arrive in onto Jurgen's desk come June and say, Gaffer, I want to transfer? What's to say Virgil van Dijk doesn't say the same thing? What's to say that Thiago doesn't say the same thing? What's to say that Alisson doesn't say the same thing? Imagine a world as a Liverpool fan without Alisson Becker being there. Just let that sink in. Scary. But the fall has been monumental. We've gone from, if you can imagine, I use the analogy of a wedding. And when you go to a wedding, there's a top table where the main family sits and the bride and the groom. And we've been sitting at that top table in Europe and recently in domestic football as well. But for some reason this season, the drop-off has been, as I said, monumental. And now we find ourselves kind of in the middle of that wedding party now, sitting at a table, looking around, and not even sitting with friends, sitting with strangers, namely Brighton, Villa, Brentford, and Fulham, and teams like that are now sitting at our table at the wedding. And that's a real concern as well. And when that paints that picture, that coupled with the disarray at the moment in the backroom situation between the transfer committee, the medical staff, and all those kind of things seem fractured as well. And that coupled with the fact that it's highly, highly, highly unlikely that we'll get top 4. So we're going to be out of the Champions League. And I know people will say that FSG will use that as an excuse. And we're going to get onto that. I have a great tweet today that was put out by John O'Sullivan, a guy who I see on Twitter all the time, and sometimes I see in some of the shows as well. But his tweet really summed up something, and I wanted to put it up on the screen today for you. And I will. I'll get to it. Don't worry about that. That paints a kind of a strange picture in terms of, if you look at the situation at the moment, the climate out there in terms of European football and UK football at the moment, and you're Jude Bellingham and you're sitting there and you're kind of on top of the world. You're one of the most sought after, if not the most sought after midfielder in world football. And you're surveying the landscape and you're going, do I want to go to Man City? Pep Guardiola, fantastic footballers, plenty of money, building a legacy. Some will always slag them off about history and all that kind of stuff, but certainly building that legacy there. And I mean, who's to say that Pep, after last night's performance, doesn't go on and win a Champions League, could win an FA Cup, could win a league, and tomorrow night we're going to be talking about that situation in terms of, could he land a treble and cement his legacy in football? No doubt about it. You'll get the money that you want. You'll certainly win silverware, and then you look at how appealing it might be to go to Man United on the Ten Hag project. Real Madrid, of course, are always sniffing around the top players. Barcelona kind of have their own problems, so they're not in it at the moment. Depending on what happens in PSG during the summer, there's talk about the front three being broke up and certainly work to be done in the midfield. Jude Bellingham would certainly fit a profile for PSG. So we find ourselves that we have spent 2 years flirting with the idea of Jude Bellingham. And yet, we've put on ice, we've mortgaged the season, as some people have said. We've held back on signing players. We didn't get Chouameni. We wanted him. We wanted to sign Bellingham. We didn't sign Mateus Nunes. We brought in Arthur Melo on loan last minute, and we all know how that's gone. What is the pattern that's developing here, and how does it sit between FSG and between Jurgen Klopp, and who's culpable? Or sometimes we've said this season as well that it's very hard to view them separately. But what is this doing to the legacy of Jurgen Klopp? And it's kind of bewildering at the moment, the way things are kind of evolving, because we don't really know why is he kind of rowing in behind them and accepting these decisions when he probably should be challenging them and asking why is he not getting the support that he needs and all that kind of stuff. And it's very, very strange at the moment, what's going on. And sometimes I look at it from the outside, and think about this in the chat as well. Sometimes I look from the outside and I think, are they actually trying to force him to leave? Are they trying to get him to make the decision to go by constantly breaking his heart? I mean, obviously we know it's a very good job in world football, but this season has been quite wearing on everyone. It's been quite toxic. We've got a fractured fan base who this season have probably spent more time arguing with each other than pushing about the issues that we should be pushing about, which is, a new ownership and investment, and forcing the owners to do things the way we'd like them to do it. We've spent more time going in on each other for difference of opinions. So it's an interesting one. Let me take some comments here. Comments are building up. Henry, how are you, my friend? Hope you're doing good. Redbird in there as well. Evening. How are you, son? And hi, Redbird and Henry. Redbird, too much fan hype over Jude. He loved Gerrard, but wasn't a Liverpool fan growing up. Though his dad is. Jude has never said he wants to play for us. Yeah, I mean, it's the whole background story that's built up as well, isn't it? The whole idea of he's out eating with Trent in a restaurant, and he hangs out with Hendo at international duty, and he wants to come and become a club captain and a legend, and the whole thing with Gerrard and all this kind of stuff. And I get it, and they hype it up and they hype it up and they hype it up. Remember, this kid, if you had thrown the money on the table last summer, probably could have got him out of Dortmund for 75, 80 million, maybe. And now, listening to the hype that's going around between Liverpool backing off, it sounds like that's nearly doubled at this stage between agent fees, and then when you look at wages, the wage demands must be huge as well, I would imagine. So let's see. Henry agrees with Redbird. I mean, just because FSG have pulled out doesn't mean Jude has. Yeah, and I mean, we read that as well today, Henry, and that's a real good point as well, that Jude Bellingham wants apparently to go to Liverpool, but he's been very disappointed in the situation with FSG, obviously, which is no surprise. We all do, we get disappointed in that situation. And I think this whole thing of this bid that was lodged, that was 84 or 85 million, kind of the valuation of Jude Bellingham wasn't a surprise to anyone. And if it was a surprise to FSG, I'd be absolutely shocked. I mean, they must be living under a rock. And to go in with a bid of 84 or 85 million, and we don't know the details of it, we don't know if there was add-ons or more money or payment terms or whatever it was, it's probably insulting. And I'd say they probably looked at it and they probably spoke to Jude and said to Jude, these guys aren't for real. These guys are taking the piddle, and we're not having any of it, so you better come up with a different plan. And I'd say that's probably what went down on the basis of that bid. And furthermore, I'd say that's a bid that a lot of Liverpool fans were getting gassed about when they know that Jude Bellingham is going to take upwards of 130 million to get out of there, plus whatever add-ons and other stuff that comes with it. You're probably looking at 160 million in total, not even including wages and stuff like that. Redbird, Jude plays with a knee brace. Maybe that's a worry. How many injury-prone players do we need? That is a worry, and especially at his young age, that is definitely a concern. And I would also add to that as well that when he has come back to the UK to play on UK soil, we've seen the matches against Chelsea and stuff like that. Is that a player that you would value at 130 million? Ask yourself that. We know he's sensational in the Bundesliga, but we know that Jadon Sancho was sensational in the Bundesliga as well. But then the flip side of that is Erling Haaland was sensational in the Bundesliga, but Erling Haaland would be sensational in any league he plays in. And we also have to accept the fact that there's a risk with any transfer. Whole team red, yeah, absolutely. Let's see what Jude says in the summer. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point as well, Henry. I do like that one as well because, to be taking yourself out of a race in April that starts in June is a little bit strange, all right. But maybe that came out because maybe one that Liverpool were trying to create a ploy there to dampen down the market a little bit. Or maybe they were trying to, set the scene in relation to Dortmund, but we know how hard Dortmund negotiate and all that kind of stuff, so we should know better. But that's a very good point, in the summer, let's see what happens. But I've noticed, if you notice, in a lot of the transfer windows recently, people have been getting their business done early because they don't want to get into this back and forth kind of thing, and then all of a sudden you get to the last week and there's an issue with a medical or something doesn't happen, or paperwork. We've seen the paperwork with Ziyech, with PSG and all, with Chelsea and the problems around that. So the Anfield Lark just tweeted, club have contacted Brighton over Moise Caicedo. That's no surprise. I mean, look, there's absolute umpteen amounts of stuff going out there at the moment, and because we're on social media and on Twitter, we're getting bombarded with absolute crap at times. Apparently we're in for Alexis McAllister. Now, does anyone in the chat think that Brighton are just going to empty their tank of players? That midfield are just going to get rid of Caicedo, get rid of Alexis McAllister, get rid of all these players. It doesn't happen that way. And for people, yourself, for people to be thinking that way is absolutely crazy. And look, this is hysteria at another level, and it's crazy. City will buy him red. Yeah. Listen. They won't hold back if they decide that they want them, that's for sure. We're a seriously poor transfer business for years. FSG won't entertain a bidding war. FSG won't entertain. It doesn't even have to become a bidding war once it goes a certain level. I mean, I don't know. I mean, did anyone truly believe? Did anyone see a situation where FSG would pay 100 million plus for a player? I mean, I didn't see it. Definitely didn't see it. Maybe Jude stays at Dortmund until summer 2024 and then leaves after handing in a transfer request, unless he speaks to Dortmund and forces his way out. I can't see anything else working. Just depends who comes along with the money, doesn't it? Depends who comes along with the money, really. You know what I mean? I don't think he'll want to force his way out, because I think if you force your way out and hand in a transfer request, don't you forgo your kickback out of it, as far as I know, or something like that. So I don't know whether that's the man is in the house. What's the bleeding story, Niall? What's up, Del boy? Hope you're doing well. Great stuff. Interesting stuff last week. Be interesting to see how this week unfolds. But come on, the Arsenal with the title race. Absolutely. Redbird, I'm not listening to rumours anymore. I believe it when I see it. Yeah, I've gotten to that stage now. Unless he's standing in the AXA training centre in Anfield holding a jersey. I don't know about you, Redbird, but I learned that from that is a Naby Fekir transfer. That just sold it for me. Unless they're holding the jersey, good luck. And Henry, I'm good. Absolutely. Ian Barron is in. How are you, Ian? Hope things are all good. Good evening, everyone watching. Hoping you're well. Have liked, guys. Have you please subscribe and like? It helps the channel grow. Thanks. Absolutely appreciate that, Ian. Good to see you there, mate. It's going to be a tough market in the summer. Most top teams are going to spend up to 250 million. Yeah, absolutely. But the problem there, Ian, as we said already, is if you look at the base of where teams are at, if you look at where Newcastle's at, if you look at where United's at, if you look at where City's at, if you look at where Arsenal's at, if you overlay 250 million of spend potentially onto those teams, as opposed to spending 250 million onto where Liverpool is the moment, it's a huge difference. Because I believe if, in order to be challenging next season, I believe if City spend 200 million this transfer window coming up, we probably have to spend 400 million, because we're way off it. There could be a lot of cash plus player transfers in the summer, I think. Yeah, absolutely. And there'll be all sorts of crazy deals being done. Todd Bowley has set the narrative, really, hasn't he? In terms of that kind of stuff. Even if he's made this decision, he wouldn't want to rock the boat until after the end of the Bundesliga season. I don't know whether that matters, Henry, does it, if you're out of there? I know where you're coming from, potentially, with Dortmund being in and around it and stuff like that, but yeah, I don't know. God, can you imagine if he goes on and wins the Bundesliga with Dortmund or something like that? Good, another 10 million now. Evening, Niall. Almost sober. Yeah, absolutely. You getting there? Hope the head and everything and the body's all good, mate. Redbird back in. What about Sadio punching his teammate Sané last night after the game? He drew blood. Sadio not very happy. Sadio hasn't been happy about the move to Bayern Munich now practically since he got there. And yeah, apparently bloodied up Sané's lip. Apparently this was a follow-on. Apparently they clashed on the pitch as well. But that was some performance last night by Man City. Not necessarily in both halves, but in the second half when Pep changed it up and stuff like that. They just came alive. Can you imagine? You're taking Kevin De Bruyne off and you bring on those players and they just come alive, and it's 3-0, you know what I mean? Or, you know what I mean? It's unbelievable, and Haaland is just unbelievable. So many players there, like it's hard to believe they haven't won a Champions League yet. They're such a good team, and he's such a good coach, and it just sickens me. Like Coutinho did with Barca, yeah. I think that was a kind of a different situation though, Henry. I think that suited both parties, because they had to get value and money out the door in order to grant their La Liga license or something like that. So you got to remember they're sort of barrel feeding at the moment as well, in terms of selling off the crown jewels to generate money to allow them to register players and do all sorts of things. So it's hard. It's you can't really compare it to straight to the Barca situation, but absolutely. GP, look at the way Arsenal got held up with Mudryk and got Trossard for a fraction of the price. Liverpool need numbers over elite signings right now, and we're going to get onto that, Morris. That would be my view. All right, I've always kind of been of the opinion that as the season went on and as it developed, that we needed more and more players, and we arrive at maybe 5, 6, or 7 at this stage. That like signing one player for 130 million, namely Jude Bellingham, then you're going. Then what they're going to do is they're gonna lock the safe FSGR, and then you're going to be scrounging around at free transfers, and you're going to be going into the Rabios of this world and various things like that and stuff. And it's just not going to work. I mean, you come back next season, you're pretty much the same team except it's Jude Bellingham. And then you play 5 games, the guy has a knee brace on, and the next thing he breaks down with a knee and he's gone for 3 months or something like that. And we're back being what we are this season. Meanwhile, all the contenders around us, and even those just above mid-table, the Brightons of this world, the Brentfords of this world, the Fulhams of this world, all Aston Villas of this world, are all strengthening, and we've put all our eggs into the Jude Bellingham basket, and it hasn't worked out, and that's a real concern for me. But you're spot on there. Absolutely, the way to go is bring in decent quality players at the right level, but we need a few. We need a few. No such thing as almost sober. Henry, you haven't met Morris. Absolutely. You coming to my live read at 9 p.m. I may need bodyguards if Charlie Webb appears with a Hashan Lee. Yeah, absolutely. GP, Detox and Henry, meanies and sausages. There's a combination. Meanies and sausages. Wow. Henry, great job, Morris. Good luck. And Morris, have to watch out for Villa next season. I'm telling you, man, wait till you see Villa next season when Emery gets another window under him and he's able to bring in a few more players that he has a keen eye for, and lads that he's aware of in La Liga and stuff like that. He'll get some decent players in and stuff like that. And he's a serious coach, Emery. Remember, from 16th to 6th. 16th to 6th. Let that sit in. Absolutely incredible. Dean Smith going to Leicester. Interesting. So that's what I want to talk about. But I suppose that was just to kind of give you a flavour and set the scene. So I suppose when we look at this, of course, a lot of this hysteria being caused by Paul Joyce and, of course, James Pearce and lads like that putting this stuff out there. So what we heard, of course, no less than a week ago from these guys was that Jude Bellingham was progressing well and that he'd probably be a Liverpool player and blah, 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 blah. So here's what came out. Paul Joyce in the Times, Liverpool cool pursuit of Jude Bellingham and seek midfield alternatives. And Paul Joyce had named the Jude Bellingham alternatives. Liverpool are likely to sign at least 2 midfielders and probably 2 more to bolster their engine room, and have been linked to numerous targets such as Chelsea's duo Mason Mount and Conor Gallagher, Bayern Munich's Ryan Gravenberch, who we spoke about on the show, Brighton and Hove Albion's Alexis McAllister and Moise Caicedo, Wolverhampton Wanderers Mateus Nunes, and Leicester City's Yuri Tillemans, who was available on a free transfer. I love that, the way they put that at the end. Anytime they talk about Liverpool targets, there's always 1 or 2 in there available on a free transfer. Terrible. So that was that. And I'm going to bring up a slide now in a minute in the backup to this. Pearce came out as well, James Pearce, of course. And look, I do value both these guys. I'm not going in on them in any way. Maybe they're fed a narrative from the club in some way or something like that. And maybe that's what this is about. Maybe this is a ploy to dampen things down. And I will show you a slide in a minute on my thinking on that. But Liverpool cannot justify Bellingham's cost. I think Liverpool had a proper discussion with Dortmund, and Dortmund said, this is what we want. This is what he's valued at. That's what we believe we can get. And you're probably 50 million off with your opening bid, so you're wasting your time. They got wind of what the salary would be. They probably looked at the agent fees as well. And if Jurgen Klopp has a 250 million budget, let's say for argument's sake, that's what he has. That's what we spoke about in the chat. If that's the budget that he has, that has to be 5 players. That has to be a minimum of 5 players coming in. Slice it down any way you want. If it's 50 millions or whatever it is, slice it down whatever way you want. But that's what has to happen. If we don't sign at least 5 to 6 players this summer. We're absolutely wasting our time. Absolutely wasting our time. It will surprise a lot of people as he was widely regarded as their top target. Absolutely, said Pierce. But somewhere between 80 million and 130 million, Liverpool got lost, said Pierce. But those I've spoken to at the club have said that after lengthy discussions, the deal stopped making sense. But 2 weeks ago, the deal kind of made sense. 2 weeks on from that, the deal doesn't make sense because maybe Jurgen Klopp had a meeting with FSG and laid it out on the line what he needed. And they said, well, if you need all that, we won't be throwing 150 million at Jude Bellingham, that's for sure. And that was the end of that. It comes down to the fact sources have quoted it'll cost 150 million euros, about 130 million pounds, with agent fees, big wages on top of that, and all that kind of thing. And let's be honest, he's not going anywhere unless we're talking 300 grand a week, which is crazy money for a kid like him. Crazy money. And on top of the cost, Pierce highlighted Liverpool's unwillingness to enter into a potential transfer saga with no assurance of it being successful. Okay, so that's interesting. So this is where it's kind of, this is this game that a lot of teams are playing these days, isn't it? We're kind of in for him, but we're not in for him. We're talking to him, but we're not talking to him. All this kind of crack. Because they don't want to be the one that's shown up to miss out. And that would be a massive chunk of Klopp's kitty, and they cannot justify that on one player. This is the point that's been going on. This has been known all season, so I don't know why this whole Jude Bellingham narrative continues to gather pace. The snowball coming down the hill got bigger and bigger and bigger. When we knew that if we needed 5, 6, 7 players, we weren't spending 130 or 150 million on a player. On top of the cost, Pierce highlighted Liverpool's unwillingness to enter in the saga, as we said. They felt they could not put all their eggs in one basket without any guarantees Bellingham would even leave Dortmund. Jude Bellingham being signed by Liverpool on his own doesn't change Liverpool one bit. I can say that right now. It does not change Liverpool one bit with the problems that we have. Or if he did, would he then choose Liverpool? The club are adamant they have moved on. So the club are talking about how they have moved on. And the worrying thing out of all this as well, I think Liverpool kind of had to move on because I don't think that's the kind of money they would be willing to spend on a player. Because what happens is, not only if you spend that type of money on that player, what it does is, if you do follow up them with a number of other transfers that you're targeting, the cost of that escalates and escalates and escalates. We've seen it at times with Man United and stuff like that, and a number of different clubs as well, where when they spend big money on a player, they're held to ransom down on further transfers and stuff like that. And this is the worrying thing for me, and this is one that I'm really concerned about. Klopp is fully on board with the decision not to sign Jude Bellingham. And that to me is really, really disappointing because he's probably been Klopp's main target for the last 2 years. So what is this? Is this a situation where, is this the real Jurgen Klopp? Would the real Slim Shady please stand up? Is this him saying, right, you've decided not to back me. You're not giving me 350, 400 million that I need to rebuild this whole team. This is what I'm going to get. We know there's an investment coming in somewhere in the region of 1.3 billion for something like 33% of the club. That's a story behind it and stuff like that. How much of that was earmarked for transfers, we do not know. But I would imagine if you're an investor putting that money in, you would expect Liverpool to be, in the race for the Champions League and all that kind of stuff, because that's how your investment grows. The only way you grow a club is through success. Liverpool hasn't gone from 300 million to 3.5 billion or whatever it is because we've been losing. No, it's because we've been winning, and because we've been winning and because of our broadcasting rights and the volume of TV stuff and all that kind of stuff that we have there, plus the image rights of the players that we've signed and all that kind of stuff, we are very appealing from a commercial point of view, and our commercial revenues have grown greatly. No less the Nike deal, which I don't know where all the promised money from that is gone. Not to mention the chew of many money that went back into the safe that didn't happen and then just disappeared as if by magic. But this is really concerning for me, and this is why, and chat, you can let me know what you think. Can we now approach FSG and Jurgen Klopp as separate entities? Or what way do we work with this now? How do we row in with this? We have to kind of accept that it's kind of the same. If you look at a lot of the decisions that have been coming out, a lot of those decisions have been backed. But this I think is a poor one. We know this would have been a statement signing, but we also know that we need a lot of players signed up, and there's a kind of an unwillingness to make that level of investment. So I suppose you have to ask yourself this question. If we bring in Jude Bellingham, 1 or 2 free transfers maybe, does that make us better than if we go and we spend 260 million, 250 million on 5 quality players? If we bring in a midfield of Alexis McAllister, Paulina of Fulham, Moise Sadio, whatever it is, whatever the mix is, Nicola Barella, whatever it is, you know what I mean? Whatever midfielders you want to pick out, we probably have a list of 20 at this stage, and we've been linked with every one of them. And we've seen pictures on Twitter and on social medias of every one of them in Liverpool kit done up and stuff like that. But whatever it is, if you bring in 3 quality midfielders in there, plus you have the money to bring in a central defender that we need in terms of cover, and then whatever else we want to do in terms of other players that might move out, and what we want to do with our bench, and the views that we take on Joe Gomez and Curtis Jones and whatever else it is, Stefan Bietic coming back, all that kind of stuff. Does that make us stronger than just signing a Jude Bellingham and maybe a Rabiot on a free, or a Yuri Tillemans on a free? This is the dynamic of what has to happen here. Again, I would stress, a season that started with 1 or 2 players needed has ended with 6, 7, maybe 8 players needed. And that's only what we know in terms of maybe what transfer requests might be made in the summer due to the disappointment of what's gone on. But this one for me is really, really concerning. It's kind of like, it feels like if it's true, it's waving the white flag, isn't it? It's waving the white flag. And we've seen a bit of that this season. Let's take some comments. Have to watch out for Philly. Yeah, Henry's back. And get some dinner, Niall. Take care. See you soon. Next live, whenever that is. Bye, chat. Absolutely, Henry. Good to see you, man, in there. And thanks for dropping by. 3-0 Chelsea tonight. Thought the fortune teller has spoken. Can't wait for the memes. Mars, I have a little short up there on the channel that I dropped in relation to that. A cricket score coming with Real Madrid winning. It should be interesting, you know what I mean? But again, we've seen what Tuchel did when he went in there. We've seen what Roberto Di Matteo did when he went in there and all. Who knows? But listen, the eye test will tell you what's probably going to happen. But let's see. You just never know. Chelsea, look at Chelsea. Look at the teams they've beaten on the way to winning at that time with Tuchel and stuff like that. They played some serious football in Europe. So let's see. Gallagher will be a good industrial signing for Liverpool. Defo him over Mount. Morris, I'm not being bad here, but I don't want either of them. Because I know with the situation that Chelsea are in at the moment and stuff like that, they're going to want top dollar for players. I seen quotes going around last week that apparently they want 70 million for Mason Mount. And I think he's in going into the last year of his contract. It's absolutely madness. We'll just wait a year and sign him on a free, if that's the case. I think Gallagher, Rice, Souček, McTominay, Calvin Phillips would all do a job in Liverpool's middle. They certainly improve what's there at the moment, that's for sure. I'm not sure about McTominay. And I'm not sure about Calvin Phillips. I don't know whether we need any more players that end up in the ER room, as they say. I think it's too much money, and you are right to pull out of it. Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing. The thing is, have we really pulled out of this before it even started, or is it a ploy from Liverpool to dampen down the market one way or another? And let's see, is there other teams truly in for him and stuff like that? And does he want to go elsewhere? I seen an article today talking about how um, Jude Bellingham was absolutely furious with FSG that he wants to go to Liverpool, but obviously, I presume between FSG and Liverpool and Dortmund, they're poles apart in terms of their valuation, and that's a real problem. But this is coming on and moving on from what I spoke about there in terms of the reporters and journalists that are out there doing that. This is the kind of thing that you see out there, we had from Paul Joyce there a while ago. There is a chance that the arrival of Jude Bellingham simply turning the page on this abysmal campaign solves all those squad-led inadequacies. If Klopp believes that, then Liverpool will go all in to land the Borussia Dortmund and England midfielder. Which, from what we've heard, is clearly not the case. Now, what I would say, the other top one here is from Florian, of course, in Sky Germany, talking about how Klopp is 100% behind the decision to stop it. But these journalists have come out and they have said other stuff. If you look here, Liverpool in pursuit of Alisson, that was reported by Paul Joyce. And of course, they're not always going to get it right either, And then also on the Thiago Alcantara one as well. Latest update was it's bad news that it wasn't going to happen, and we know that it happened. But I do think the key concern is really the volume of players that we now need, as opposed to what we thought was the situation back in August. And I think that's where the landscape and the narrative has changed in terms of what's required. Again, I would say Jude would have been a statement signing. But I mean, in terms of a rebuild and what we need, it's a huge rebuild. And I don't think as fans, I don't think we fully understand the magnitude of this rebuild. As I said, we could have guys handing in transfer requests and stuff. There was talk going around today even that Jordan Henderson might be leaving, might be going out the door. I didn't get a lot of detail on it, but I've seen it flash up a few times. So I don't know the validity of it, but it'd be interesting. I think it's too much money and you're right to pull out. Yeah, absolutely, Morris. We've seen that one. This all happened with Sancho too, remember, as well. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that could be the case, and Henry alluded to it earlier, that he might stay on Dortmund until 2024, and then maybe that's when it happens and stuff like that. But then what do we do? Does that mean this season we're not going to sign any midfielders because we're going to wait till 2024? And then we get down the narrative of FSG again next year, next transfer window, next year. Mbappe 2021, 22, 23, remind people and all this kind of stuff. Not that I thought we were ever going to sign Kylian Mbappe, but you know what I mean? This is kind of where this has come out and stuff like that. So a lot of the hysteria that's come out like that and stuff like that from reporters close to the club and stuff like that, just don't forget, at times in the past they have gotten it wrong and we have signed the players that we targeted. So it's not always all what it seems. And let's see what develops over the next few weeks as players get focused on their push towards the end of the season, and kind of park a lot of the stuff that's going on. But just the constant barrage day after day after day. Like I've never seen a situation with so much transfer news outside of transfer windows. We're linked with everyone because everyone knows we're on our knees in terms of the players that we have in the squad and the work that needs to be done. So literally every day we're linked with 10 players. I could spend all day talking about player links, but most of it is just probably fob and it's not worth getting into. But that's an interesting slant on it as well. So for me, I didn't want to miss out on Jude Bellingham. I wanted us to sign Jude Bellingham, but not at the behest of, not getting in the number of players that we need and that quality that we need as well in those positions. And I think that's really, really important to understand, that we kind of really are in the mire and we need a number of bodies in there. And Jude would be just one of them. And I wanted to finish out, obviously, as I told you, about a tweet from John O'Sullivan on Twitter, and go out there and follow him on Twitter and stuff like that. He's a good lad. I see him on Twitter all the time. We tend to go back and forth and stuff like that on stuff, and we tweet stuff and like stuff and all that kind of stuff. But John summed it up here perfectly. The talk going around as well at the time was in terms of the amount of money available because we're going to be out of the Champions League. Now, if we don't make top four, and it looks very unlikely, and we are out of the Champions League, that is because of a number of things. And mainly those things are in relation to the squad, which is partially responsibility of the manager, who sat on his hands and thought we didn't need midfielders and mortgaged off a season in relation to Jude Bellingham, which may or may not happen now. And also FSG's reluctance to give us the money that we need. And they're talking about, being out of the Champions League now, money might be tight. The usual narrative that we knew was coming. We knew it was coming. We spoke about it weeks ago. But John summed it up here lovely. We signed Elliot Adrian and Sepp van den Berg in summer 2019 after winning the Champions League for a combined total of 6 million. In the same summer, we made 44 million in player sales. But having no Champions League football is supposedly why we can't spend big this summer. And I thought that would be a beautiful way to end the show and sum it up there perfectly, that if they're going to use the narrative of no Champions League, and when you think about all the commercial deals and the Nike deal that they put out there, the best kit deal ever in world football, and all this kind of stuff that's out there, and the Redbird investment and all this other stuff that came in and stuff like that. This cannot be used as an excuse. This not making top four sits at both FSG and Jurgen Klopp's door. These are the people who decided to wring the towel dry in relation to the squad, who didn't recognise the fact that the squad was in trouble, who also spent money in positions that not necessarily were the right positions to spend money in, who sat back and we didn't have a club doctor for 6 months while we were absolutely obliterated with injuries, who sat back and didn't give us that extra player, that one or two other players that we needed. The lack of signings in midfield, both from the manager's level and the ownership level, is unforgivable what they did in terms of 5 or 6, 7 transfer windows, whatever it is, 2018, 19. I mean, I think Thiago was the last midfielder that we signed, and of course we're trying to bring through youth and all that kind of stuff, but that's a case of necessity more than anything. So that's my take on Jude Bellingham. Am I disappointed? Absolutely. Am I disappointed for the gaffer? I am. But I think it's time now that, that he rose up to be counted. He talks about his love of the club and the fans and Anfield and all this stuff associated with the culture and the legacy of the club. I always regard him as being the guardian for us as fans. He is the bridge between us and the ownership. And it looks like that bridge is sliding more the other way than our way these days. And that's a little bit concerning for me. And I just wonder, I wonder if FSG testing his mettle. And who knows, maybe in the summer we might be even looking for a manager, which is heartbreaking to even think about. But until next time, folks, thanks for joining me in the chat. Really appreciate all your comments. You now know my thoughts on Jude Bellingham. Let's see what progresses over the next few months. But I'm going to be irate if I find out we're going to wait another year from and we don't do anything in the market and it's more of the same. I will be absolutely livid. So let's see how this summer goes. Let's take a breath. Let's not absorb in everything that gets posted and create mass hysteria and stuff like that. There's enough shite going on at the club without us chiming in on top of it. Let's see how everything pans out, and as we know, the truth will eventually set you free. There's no doubt about it. Until next time, folks, like on the video, subscribe to the channel and all the channels in the chat as always. Support everyone and hit that bell notification because we go live all the time. I will be back tomorrow night with Thursday Tier Talk, Beat the Bookie, Premier League preview, Champions League review, and loads of headlines to talk about. There's no doubt about it. Dazzler will be joining me as always. Until next time, folks, deep breath. Take it easy.